It's my pleasure to be able to share with you a brief presentation that I put together for a community event, a global community event recently, around leading customer experiences in the new school. Because we've talked a lot about customer experience so far today, it's also very important that we look at the impact of this technological revolution that we're experiencing, which is of a similar scale to the Industrial Revolution, and the requirement that it means for the ways in which we lead organizations. And this is a key area. Now, the Industrial Revolution were major turning points in history. In fact, there are two major industrial revolutions, the late 18th to the mid-19th century, and again, the late 19th to the early 20th century. And during those periods, the important thing to remember is almost every aspect of daily life was influenced in some way. Average income and population began to exhibit unprecedented sustained growth. Of course, the way work was managed changed fundamentally to enable this to happen. And we're now moving into the second of two digital revolutions, sometimes called the third and the fourth industrial revolutions. And this is the shift away from mechanical and analog electronic technology to digital electronics, which began in the latter half of the 20th century and moved into the 21st century. Now, the fourth industrial revolution emerged in 2015 and is marked by breakthroughs in emerging technologies such as robotics, artificial intelligence, nanotechnology, quantum computing, biotechnology, the Internet of Things, the industrial Internet of Things, decentralized consensus, fifth generation wireless technologies, 3D printing, and fully autonomous vehicles. And I'm sure you know what each of those are. Harvard Business School, and this is where I want the focus to be, has identified through these third and fourth industrial revolutions, the digital revolutions, that there are three priorities that we need to make sure we're focusing on as business leaders and as owners. The first one is the importance of reimagining your place in the world. So instead of just focusing on digitizing what you already do, it's actually reimagining where you could and should be positioned in terms of the value you're creating in the world for customers. A great example of the kind of shifts that have gone on here have been in the pharma business, where once upon a time a new drug or a new treatment might have taken 15, 20, 25 years and billions of dollars of investment and a lot of quite essentially dodgy animal tests before it got into human trials, 90, 95% failure rates. Compare that to today, where we see the most extraordinary collaborations between many different organizations, globally, internationally, digitally enabled knowledge exchanges, the use of iPad technology, to create an agility in terms of developing new treatments that probably is why we're back out of lockdown and capable of at least limping along in this relatively post-COVID world. And there are many businesses through this digital revolution that are going through similar seismic shifts. The second thing is to create value through ecosystems rather than just trying to be an isolated organization doing it all alone. The third priority is that we need to reimagine our organization to enable a different model of how we create value. So rather than asking people to work in new ways within the confines of an old model, to actually look at creating an entirely new model. So what does that mean for how we lead? The word digital is quite often associated with the concept of disruption, but it doesn't always mean disruption. The Uber example was always cited as disruptive technology. Well, Uber actually basically just offered a more accessible, cheaper service. The original taxi service has continued. Airbnb was another disruptive technology. It expanded the market to include down-market facilities, but it didn't actually change the hotel business too much. They've remained stable and high in their bookings. We've only just, I think, recently experienced true disruption. COVID was disruptive. And digital technology has helped to solve some of the problems. One of our presenters has been talking about this idea of 7 years of development in 7 months through COVID in terms of digital revolution. Of course, the millions of employees who are willing to adapt fast and fully through lockdown was a major factor in how we managed to make change happen. And we sometimes underestimate the level of engagement, the level of ability and willingness to work with ambiguity that millions of people showed during that period. Gives us a glimpse as to what human beings are actually capable of when they're in a situation where they're fully bought in, fully engaged, they see the reason why, and they're committed. And more often than not, we see in these organizations that manage COVID transformation successfully, there was a tremendous amount of humanity in the way in which they were led. Leaders were being much more intentional, the way they communicated online, by Zoom, very much a humanization of the workplace. And look what happened, look what was possible, look at the success that that created. So most importantly, I think digital technology is disruptive when it actually changes the way we work. And by changing the why we do what we do, the what it is, the how it is, the who does it, the when and the where, that governs how things are done. Now, some research at MIT Sloan looked at how a group of modern middle managers and execs of some leading organizations were seeing the impact of the digital revolution and what we need to be thinking about in our planning. And as you can see, 700 middle managers and executives from a variety of different countries and cultural backgrounds identified 6 key impacts of digital. The first one is digital technology can completely eliminate an elite group's skills or knowledge and even enable complete automation of their work. So more often than not now, when we do our accounts, we don't necessarily need an expert accountant to do every aspect of it. So much of it can be done online. Our invoicing systems can use iPhone technology. You know, the democratization of some fundamental professional skills are enabled by digital technology. Of course, we're also seeing the fact that less skilled people can be highly empowered and can have their capabilities increasingly augmented. You know, without a laptop, what could I do? What could I achieve without a laptop? I can do an amazing amount of things with a laptop, with an iPhone. And of course, we know just how functional they are and how empowering they are when one of them doesn't work or we lose one of them. And then we have to reorganize our lives around them. But, you know, things like digital music, you don't even need to learn a musical instrument now to create really, really good music using digital technology. Digital photography has empowered so many people to create brilliant photography without necessarily going to art college. Thirdly, work can and quite often must be distributed over time and geography. We're becoming increasingly thought-driven rather than muscle-driven as we evolve into these new states. And we're seeing that new needs that aren't predictable just pop up out of nowhere that can add a lot of great value, and new entrants can identify these needs and meet those needs, and we can see rapid growth. Photobox were on this morning talking about the expansion of photo-based jigsaws and gifts and memorabilia that they saw through COVID as people really started wanting to connect with their humanity, with each other, with their families and their friends. And we're also seeing, to a good extent and a bad extent, just how transparent people need to be and can't fail to be with the amount of exposure that we get on social media. So digital technology disrupts many industries and fundamentally changes the way work's done. It often produces massive benefits or advantages if your company's in the lead. So how we define what a great leader is changing at high speed as well. So the question I want you to be thinking about is, in your organization, how can you help the leaders of your organization surf the wave of the digital revolution? So let's start looking at what that means together. One question that you might want to discuss in your management meetings is, given these shifts, given these trends, given these changes, is what do your young leaders need to be doing more of or to start doing that they're not doing currently, or that in the old school they wouldn't have done? What is the shift here? What do we want more of? What do people need to start doing? I've got some suggestions for you. Equally, we need to be thinking about old school leaders. You know, what do we need to do less or stop doing in terms of the way in which we lead? And I've got a little bit of research to share with you on that as well. Now, if we go back to old school leadership around the Industrial Revolution, we are all impacted by the system of scientific management that was advocated by Fred Taylor. And his view was that the task of factory manager was to determine the best way for the worker to do the job, to provide them the best tools and the best training, and to provide incentives for doing the work. He broke each job down into its individual motions, analysed these to determine which were essential, and timed the workers with a stopwatch. With unnecessary motion eliminated, the worker, following a machine-like routine, became far more productive, and it worked. And of course, this gave rise in more recent years to an old model of leader that we sometimes talk about in terms of silo management. This authoritarian figure at the top with silos. One group could be sales, another group could be marketing, another group could be operations, another group could be HR, another group could be distribution. And these teams work together, and we simplify the work process into separate elements and man each group to work in teams without a commitment to collaborate between the teams, and in fact, at worst, to create conflict and competition between the ambitious people in each of these teams. And of course, when things went wrong, escalations were made to the parent authority figure at the top, lots of wasted energy, not much value being added to the business, and as a result, product and service quality would suffer. And then the Japanese came along with some very, very smart US consultants and found some better ways of doing things. And Japanese management was very much to do with team culture, cross-functional collaborations, quality circles, empowering people, visual management. And they helped Japanese firms to overtake many US and European rivals. And in fact, in 1981, a David Garvin study showed that the worst Japanese manufacturers actually had a lower product failure rate than the best USA manufacturers. And this little quote by Konosuke Matsushita, who was the chairman of Panasonic. It's a famous quote, you can look it up on the internet, but it basically says that your fundamental error is you think the managers do the thinking and the workers wield the screwdrivers. But what we understand is that we need to mobilise all of the ounces, every ounce of intelligence or gram of intelligence across the workforce in order to drive the success of the company. And aren't we now looking at where this is more important than ever in terms of the way in which we work with people, where we want to move away from a know-it-all culture where expertise is valued to a learn-it-all culture where learning and evolution and agility is valued. And we can learn a lot from nature too about the way in which we can organise ourselves. If we consider ourselves as an ecosystem, then we're a little bit more like these flocking starlings, these birds that are flocking. I don't know whether you've ever seen birds flocking at sunset, but it's a fascinating experience to witness. But research at MIT has actually shown that this pattern of behaviour can actually be replicated by programming dots of light on a screen to follow three simple rules, or we could say values. And the three rules that birds follow in this situation are, firstly, don't hit the other birds, turn towards the centre, and move at the same speed. And by simulating the birds by using little dots of light on a computer screen, Craig Reynolds actually managed to replicate the flocking behaviour of starlings. And the important thing here is if we replace the word simple rules with purpose and values, we can see how we might be able to shape a complex living system as an ecosystem by uniting people around some very important and deep and powerfully held themes. And it's when we have this deep connection to values that we see behaviour start to change. And here's an example. A piece of research by Posner and Smith actually looked at the commitment of people on a scale of 1 to 7. And what this research basically showed is that the powerful factor in terms of how committed I am is the clarity of my personal values. As you can see here, the clarity of the organisation's values isn't driving my commitment. It's my belief about what I stand for and what I represent. And that actually is to a figure of 18%. Now imagine that in every management meeting, in every customer contact, in every decision about how to spend money in the company, how much of a difference that would make. And we need people to feel personally connected and empowered, so much more than just informed about what's important. So many organisations are still harming the planet, for example. Many digital transformations are dealing poorly with the human element. Purpose and values exist, but they often don't reach people or inspire them at the level of heart and soul. So it's this deep sense of what I believe, what I think is important, what I feel that important is where we need to have a conversation with people in the modern organisation. And some organisations are great at this. Look at Beavertown. We had them on recently at a session here at Engage. Their website is fantastic. We come in peace, pints and cans. We talk about our mission is to encourage everyone to unleash their creative potential. We believe there's more to get from life if you open your mind to curiosity. Look at the product titles that they've got here, some extraordinary funky products. And this is just liquid made from hops, basically. But look what people with their imagination and their creativity are turning it into. If you're a little bit more conservative, Mindful Chef is an interesting brand to look at. They talk about being real and trustworthy, being unafraid, being mindful. And we're seeing businesses invest in a whole load of health and mindful performance strategies as well in supporting people's growth as humans. Now, here's another set of values. For me, they're not really doing it for me, but would you feel as engaged working for this company? And one of the things we need to think about is how we create the climate within which people can be creative and innovative. And a piece of research here, and I'll end on this one, is McKinsey's research looking at what it is that drives psychological safety and innovation in an organisation. And basically, for you and I to take a risk to be innovative, we need to feel safe psychologically. That means that when we want to put an idea forward, we're not afraid of being blocked or humiliated or put down. We need to work in a positive team climate. And what McKinsey's research during the pandemic revealed is that only 43% of all respondents reported a positive team climate. But a positive team climate is a function of two main leadership styles in a modern organisation. Number one is supportive, and number two is consultative. When there's a positive team climate as a result of these two, there's the room for leadership to become more challenging, to challenge people to grow and develop. If challenging leadership is put in place when there's no support and no consultation, it actually is counterproductive. Unfortunately, and this is the clue for how we move forward in developing new school leaders, being authoritative has a detrimental effect today in this environment. 15 to 20 years ago, similar research found this style was actually effective in creating a positive team climate. Not so in the new school. So my challenge really for you and for me is to start saying, so how do we create a culture where people truly connect with the purpose and values at the heart and soul level, not just the intellectual level? How do we create a working environment where people feel confident, supported, consulted, even in a hybrid working environment? How can we make sure that people deliver? We had a great session this morning from Bravissimo, which is a supplier of brassiers to people who have an ample bra size. And the term Bravissimo is actually synonymous with this idea of confidence, being happy within yourself, being able to express yourself safely and comfortably and with confidence and vibrancy. And that's what we need to do in terms of creating the modern work culture, and we all need to work together to do it. Hope that's been useful for you.